Thank you for joining us today for My Story, APAC's Asian American Pacific Islander Story Series. My name is Duke Nguyen Abrahamson. I am the Executive Director of the Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce, also known as APACC. This year, APACC celebrates our 22 years of facilitating business relationships among Asian-owned and U.S.-based companies and promoting the economic advancement of the Asian American Pacific Islanders. Businesses owned by Asian Americans with heritage from China, Japan, Korea, Taiwan, Vietnam, the Philippines, and India, among other countries, Fortune 500 corporations, entrepreneurs, business professionals, cultural organizations and associations, and political and government dignitaries have supported APACC throughout the years and are the reason for our success. We are a collective voice for 30 plus Asian and Asian Pacific countries. We can do this through our strategic partnerships with Asian cultural associations throughout Michigan and nationally, and through our sponsors. Thank you to General Motors for supporting the AAPI small business community, and National ACE for being our national partner. You are going to hear from APACC's newest staff member, Zacky Salie, our operations associate. Prior to joining us, he was with Get to Your Best Self, doing all the operation functions, and is an international transformation coach. He has worked in various operation capacities at AMROC, APACC, and Zhaojun, BlackRock, and worked for over a decade at the United Nations, primarily in the Asia Pacific region. Zacky, please tell us your story.
Thank you, Duke, for the introduction. So I will start off going back to my roots. So I am originally from Sri Lanka, and I grew up having a mixed experience of the country. It happens to be a beautiful location, one of the leading tourist destinations in the world. But I grew up having to experience different dimensions of the country in addition to the tourist side. Um, I saw in '83 the civil unrest breaking in the country and firsthand experience a lot of uh, issues in terms of how certain minorities were treated. And back then, I looked a bit different as well. So I also firsthand experienced some of those challenges during that time. So having those experiences in my mind, uh, and the country, my parents' livelihood was impacted, obviously, given the civil unrest and the direct impact on the economy as well. My dad suggested for me to look at an opportunity to go to the US. I was much no, I was not willing to do that because I was a very shy person and I did not want to take adventure. So I was very hesitant, but he encouraged me, saying that, you got to look to the future and look outside the car in the front of the viewing glass and not the little glass that you see the past. So you got to think forward. So it's
How
much.
old were you? How old were you when you made this decision?
I was 19 years old uh, at the time. Even though I was 19, my mindset was of, I would say, a 16-year-old. So uh, it didn't match the age. So anyway, I reluctantly came to the US, and luckily for me, I had my brother who was studying to be an engineer, and I came uh, to Detroit. I still remember coming to 6 Mile and Illinois. At the time, it was not the favorite street, even though it has evolved since. And I got a picture firsthand of a dark winter type of uh, um, weather. I came in the height of winter time, and I came from the tropics, which was bright and sunny and a lot of green all the time. So psychologically, I was like, oh my goodness, what have I come into? So I evolved. I started off with Oakland Community College. I had a fantastic experience there. I started off with the Orchard Ridge campus, and I had a very good international student advisor. I still remember her because of the impact, Helen Habib. She welcomed me with a lot of positive, a lot of wisdom. She was somebody who had a lot of life experiences, and the entire team was very cooperative. Got me in, and I managed to contribute to the college newspaper as well. I also worked with the diverse student body. At the time, there was a lot of Asians, Europeans that were there from Turkey, Poland, Czech Republic, uh, India, Bangladesh, and I was the only Sri Lankan. So anyway, we established and got the ball rolling in terms of the international club. Then from there, I went to Walsh College, which was again a very different experience. It didn't have the uh, it was not as large as Auckland Community College, but it had its own uniqueness. There again, I worked with the student body to establish the International Students Club. And at the time, it was a very new concept for the college. So even though we had some challenges, we managed to get the ball rolling, and it's at present day it's very active. So from Walsh, I started working at McCann Erickson on the Delphi, and back then it was Detroit Edison, which split to what it is today, DTE and Consumers Energy. And and in terms of Delphi, it used to be one of the largest OEMs at the time. So we were involved in Asia, we were involved in Europe, we were involved in North America. So when we had certain very unique decisions to be made in Asia, people would come running to me, "Hey, if we use this color, what would it be? Would this be offensive?" You know, because different countries has different nuances. So that was a very good experience. And what I found very unique about McCann was I at the time I joined, I happened to be the only colored person from what I remember, or I would say only Asian person specifically. And then later on, I think over the years, like after about 3 years, uh, we started having more diversity, which I found interesting. But I had a very good experience. I still maintain contact with most of my former supervisors and team members. It was a very rich experience. But inside me, I had some calling, and which I didn't realize till later on in life, and that was the experiences I had at my early years in Sri Lanka, which I had which I wanted to make an impact somehow. So, which made me take my next step in life, which was to join the United Nations. And
So,
in the
so
United,
uh, Zachy, I'm sorry to interrupt you, and I know that you have, you really just talked about your, education experience and your work experience when you first came to the U.S. But how did you? And I know that you had your brother here. Was it difficult for you to connect with other people outside of the club? Was it hard for you to, create those friendships? Can you speak a little bit about, acclimating as a immigrant to the U.S. outside of, getting used to the weather?
right. Of course, yes. It was actually a challenge for me because, first of all, I'm a very shy person. So it takes a lot for me to go up to people. So it was, I would say, one of the biggest obstacles that I had. So I had to actually observe people. I had to observe the language difference. Like I got into big trouble when I said certain things to my English teacher who was not as well traveled, and she would say, "Why am I disrupting the class by giving certain feedback?" It got a little bit out of hand, where I had to go and see the dean, and the dean obviously knew a bit more about international cultures, and she was understanding. And then we had to have a meeting with the the dean and the English teacher and say, hey, you've got to be more sensitive to international students. And then I explained, for example, I said at the end of the punctuation at the end of a sentence is what we know and which we learned is a full stop. And she said, no, it's a period. Then I said, with all due respect, it's a full stop. And the dean was like amused, like we were going back and forth right in front of her. But the dean knew that I was a very diligent student. And later on, the English teacher started to realize that I was not trying to make fun of the class, but I was trying to be involved, but I was not aware of. So I learned it the hard way, I would say. Lots of the differences. Uh, but that was the beginning. I realized that there are that I need to observe more before I respond. So I started observing even more. And in terms of meeting people, that I would say was my biggest hurdle because I could not. First of all, initially the accents were different, so I had to get used to the accents. And then once I overcame that, then I had to have the courage to meet people. So when I was working in a group, it was really tough because at the time there weren't that many international students because I used to go to the Royal Oak location for some of my classes, and most of the students were local. So once I took the initial step and then I built the confidence, and then I realized that people are people, and once they get to know you, everything else is put secondary. So you have to have the confidence. So I realized that that is the strategy and I need to adapt. And then I started making more friends, and then from there I started doing certain activities like joining the international club, being part of the student newspaper. So that gave me more visibility, and that gave me more leverage to talk to people because I would invite people to those sessions. So in terms of meeting people, getting to know the system. That took me quite some time. Even the roads, we drive on the other side of the road in the colonial countries. So I got into trouble with the law a few times, and uh, you know, initially it worked, but subsequently, when I told an officer 8 years later, being here, that I come from a colonial country, he said, "Oh, it's about time that you learn, right? You've been here for 8 years." So it did not work after 8 years, but it did work for the first 2 years. So there were a lot of differences, I would say. But now, thankfully, I have been able to learn the both sides, the US side and the British colonized country, which Sri Lanka was. So I can now easily navigate between those two. Then one of the other things that when I was in McCann, that my office team members helped me was the cultural differences. Sri Lanka at the time was a more conservative culture, and when it came here, like one thing that I found, and I got into trouble earlier on, is when we communicate in Asian cultures, at least in back in the 90s, is you don't tend to look at a person's eyes, and I realized that that would mean that you are lying in the North American context. I learned that the hard way, even though I was a person who always did the right thing, and integrity is part of my guiding principles. I learned that you got to look at somebody when you're talking, and if you start looking left and right, it's like, oh, this person's not hiding something. So lots of things I had to learn the hard way, but I'm happy that I learned it so that I can teach my children on that. So
That's
yeah,
that's
so
some that's some great stuff. I think that people forget that when they are working with international staff or international companies, that
Mhm,
the what is considered socially norm in the U.S.
mhm,
May not be considered socially norm elsewhere. So,
Right.
what advice would you have for a company that works with other international companies, other international staff?
Right. Yeah, that's an excellent question, because this is something that I have been sharing during my United Nations tenure, the experiences I had while I was in the US, and it has been very, very useful for them. So the first thing that I would say is, we have to realize that in any part of the world, especially Asia, that's a culture that's very friendly, but at the same time, they are very respectful of any foreigner that comes into the country, and they expect the same. So one of the first things that we would need to do is, when we are working with specifically Asian countries, we need to realize that they are a very hospitable hospitable people. So we need to build the trust. So that is the first thing. And the second thing is, in that process of building the trust, we need to understand that some of the people who may convey themselves as very humble are really subject matter experts. So we should be open minded to be sensitive to see who they are, because even though they might be coming across as a very down to earth person, they probably know the A to Z of what we are looking for. So be receptive of that. And then the third thing is, we need to realize that certain procedures, strategies that we may use in North America, Europe, may not be the same cultural nuances in those parts of the world. Like, for example, in Asia, generally you tend to uh, get to know people before you get to the point. So in Asia, basically getting to the point would mean that you first break the ice and build the trust, rather than getting to the point of why the meeting is for. So it's something that we need to keep in mind before we start talking business. We start getting to know the person, getting to know uh, all about them, and the company as well, and then start the technical stuff. And then the last thing that I would say is, the networking in Asia um, is incredible. We have a joke there that it is more sophisticated than any type of technology that's out there, the word of mouth. So if you make a good impression with the right people, you would be surprised the goodwill that you have created. And there is no need to send any emails or any other form of high tech technology, because you already made your mark. So it's basically, you have to be a good listener, respect the local cultures, build the trust. And once you build that, you have already established a bridge to almost any business. And I have applied this, coming from the US to working with companies. I worked with the government, senior staff, junior staff. It's the same thing. It's the humility aspect that wins, and the trust that has worked. So this is something that I apply when I do any interactions with the Asian businesses, and even international.
Thank you so much, Zachy. And I want to go back to your story. I know that you had some negative experiences when you were younger, and
Mhm.
really kind of set you towards a certain path. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, certainly. So this little voice that was, in me, that wanted to make a bit more of an impact in my journey, was uh, something that I really wanted to address. And this took me to working at the United Nations. And I still remember having a discussion with my boss, who happened to be from the US. And I told her, I'm looking for something really challenging, not knowing what my words would mean 10 days from there. And then I managed to get in, and she went on vacation. And 10 days later, Sri Lanka was hit by tsunami. And that's a word that I didn't know what it meant at the time, and most people in Sri Lanka didn't know what it meant. But the aftermath of that was huge, not only in Sri Lanka but for a lot of neighboring countries. And I realized how fragile life is, where you could have you could have all the qualifications in the world, you could have all the assets in the world, you could have all the power in the world, but within seconds, it can all go away. So what really keeps you together is, the context that you have made and the impact that you have made in communities and how people would be there for you in that situation. So uh, I work with professionals who just breaking down, just seeing the aftermath of tsunami, the impact on lives, the impact on livelihoods, the impact on the infrastructures and all of that. But what was important is, despite the level of seniority or being junior, the ability to work as one team to get things done to places impacted by the waves. So we had to work from. Uh, I helped children get the children who were displaced. I helped to get food to them, and we had additional complexity in the midst of a tsunami. We also had a war that was ongoing in the country. So certain parts of Sri Lanka we could not get uh, the support that they needed in time because we had to go through a war zone. So we had to get friendly with the guys who are fighting too. So it was a very unique combination of skills one had to have to work with it. So we did work with it. I happen to be one of the key people who managed to do that to keep the goodwill between both sides. So we even uh, now when we fly, like we have a time that we take flights. So in Sri Lanka, when you had to reach to a certain part of the country, the planes had to fly above the war zone. So if the planes are going above a war zone, obviously it is not safe for the plane to fly. So we had to work with the government, get security clearance from the government, then get clearance from the rebel fighters saying that, hey, between this time to this time we are sending food, we are sending help, we are sending high chlorine tablets, we are sending books, we are sending clothes. Do not shoot our planes. And it's clearly marked, it says United Nations. So it was one of the most sophisticated rebel fighters in the world, but they were highly educated. I mean, they had PhDs, they had masters. So they understood when things are coming help. So coordinating that was, I would say, very challenging, but it was very satisfying because our focus was the children of the affected parts of the country, tsunami, and also the civil unrest. So, working with the government, working with implementing partners, working with the team members, working with the different section chiefs, coordinating all this was quite a challenge. And we were on emergency mode, so we would start off like at 7 in the morning, and we would finish sometimes at 11 in the night because we were all like, there was no time to look left or right. We were just task driven, get it done. Every second, every minute, like the Japanese would say, every minute is valuable. It could mean someone's life, or it could mean somebody is exposed to a disease, or it could mean that somebody is not getting a chance to finish their syllabus and not meet their exams. So everything was like moving. So it was very satisfying, but it was very stressful because there's a lot of people that were impacted by what they were seeing, and they had never seen it before. So that kind of took me to a different side as well. Uh, I got trained in psychology to deal with people who were so stressed out by what they were seeing. Plus, I was doing finance, I was doing HR, I was doing security, I was doing logistics. So somebody came up to me, and this person said, "I'm very stressed." And then I said, "Why are you stressed?" Then he said, "I'm stressed with all the finance rules and regulations that you have." So you're stressed because of me. So you want me to step aside from finance and then do you counseling on how to be stress free about me? it was so funny. So then I had to say, you know what, the procedures are there for a reason. Even in an emergency, the UN requires that we follow due process. There has to be segregation of duties. There cannot the money has to be spent for the intended purpose. The programmatic, whatever we have committed with the donors and the stakeholders, which are the children as well, and the people who are given the funds, those have to happen. So while I'm doing that, I can teach you on methods of being efficient and effective, but I cannot compromise, and I cannot tell the finance officer who happens to be me not to do their job. So let's work it out. So I work with this person on helping to make things more efficient, and getting another person to help, because the staff, we went from a staff of we went for a staff of about 75 that was planned during my interview, to it went up to about 240. So it went like by almost 3+ times. So it was a huge task that was on the learning. And then I also had the I won't say opportunity, but I would say I got exposed to situations where minority, the women, some women were not treated right. They were harassed. So I had to confidentially be involved in helping women who were uh, uh, sexually advances were being made. So I was part of those situations where I had to confidentially talk to the victim and the victimizer as well. And the reason they chose me is because of the trust and the integrity that I had displayed throughout the years that prior to the UN and during my time there. And one of the senior staff had to be let go because of we found out that the senior staff member was guilty of certain acts with solicitations that he had made with the person in the cafeteria. Then there was issues with supervisors harassing their juniors. Then there were juniors harassing their supervisors in turn, who had wanted promotions and they didn't get it. So they kind of made the narrative look like it was sexual harassment. So it was very complex. So I learned very quickly that, though I'm not a lawyer, that decisions have to be made strictly on evidence, and evidence should be got from people who have credibility. So if not, the outcome can be could not be favorable. Then I also later on, with this experience, I evolved. I started helping people in the rural parts of Sri Lanka, although they were of senior level. When it came to working with the central level, they were not able to have a voice, because they were a part of the 8%, which I happen to be as well. But by the time I joined the UN, I didn't look like a typical person, because I used to be um, a, a much darker person, and unfortunately, the skin color, you get discriminated by that.
So,
So it's
Zaki, can you explain what the 8% means?
Yes. So the 8% of the country would mean the minority, which is the Muslims, which is the Christians, and the Hindus, and the Burghers. So these are all different minorities, and of the minorities, the smallest percentage of the minorities are the Muslims, the Hindus, and the Hindus, you have the Hindu Christians, and you have the Buddhist Christians. So these are the two bigger minorities. And unfortunately, the minorities look a little bit different unless they are intermarried. So it's very easy to identify, and people of darker skin tend to get a little bit more marginalized, unfortunately. And when I was a younger boy, a younger person, I tend to be darker because I used to play in the sun and I used to always be out, never in the home. But I did get discriminated because they thought, I was part, they knew who I was. Now, when they look at me, it's difficult to identify where I am from, because I look a bit different. So this group of people, till today, it is somewhat of an issue, where they don't get they don't get heard. Sometimes they don't get equal opportunity. Like, for example, when I started, I asked question from my supervisor asking, why is it that our common badge is in only two languages? It's English and one of the local languages. I didn't understand that. And even though I could speak three languages, I'm like thinking, what if this badge is taken to a part of the country that they speak the other language, which is the minority? And then my boss was like, "You have a valid point. Why has this not been done before?" Said, "Let's, if you're on the same page with me, let's move forward." So that was the first time in that part of the world that they had the badge in three languages. I was really happy because I felt at least it's not my achievement; it's the achievement of the people of the suburbs of Sri Lanka, that now they feel that they are part of this organization that's representing them as well. Saying one thing, printing one thing, I always is think it's important, but actually putting it is in practice and in action is really what matters, not what's beautifully uh, said and put on print. So this is one of the things. And then even towards the latter parts of my tenure there, I was able to do a lot of things which helped. Even some of the reports that we were giving, we were focusing a lot on the girl child, which I always fought for. But I also pointed out that when we talk about behavioral issues, the boy child is also important, because the boy child also has emotions, and in the Asian culture, we tend to discourage the male from showing emotions. So because of that, the male is perceived as this super strong person, and when something goes wrong, they have no outlet to show emotions, and this is kind of misinterpreted in a lot of the funds that they get and the opportunities they get. So I fought for that, as at the same time while I was fighting for equity for women as well. In so many areas, women were not getting equal opportunities, like equal pay in terms of the jobs. They feel only a man can do it. So while fighting for that, I also fought for the male child as well. So I think the experiences that I had, I have helped to, you know, uh, for people who have not had the opportunity or the confidence to articulate it, I have been able to help those people, and sometimes even the majority. If it's a lady from the majority who is a shy person and has certain ideas that were not being taken into consideration, I use my seniority platform, having been there for 13 plus years, to make sure that they have an outlet to speak up. And then I also did a few stints in West Africa and the Middle East, where I saw similar type of situations I'd experienced in Asia. So I went to the level of the driver, to the level of the representative, who is considered the highest person, and wherever there was any gaps where I could support to overcome, uh, I helped to do that. And while all this was going on, my my older two kids, they were looking at their future prospects. And during that time, I got my green card, to be able to migrate to the US. So my plan was to keep them in the US and to continue my journey in the UN, which I had got some opportunities lined up to do. But my two older children said that, you know what, we need you there. Right now, the US is going through a very unusual change, um, where people of a certain faith are being targeted, people of a certain origin, Asian origin, are being targeted. So you not being there. You have all the experience of being there for many years, almost 2 decades and in a row. And so we need you. So I decided to
So
move.
when was this? When was this?
This was in 2017. So I decided to move on from the UN, and I migrated to the US. And I'm thankful I did, because there were lots of incidents that I had to help my kids and family to overcome. And I don't think they would have had the experience and depth of uh, what to do in a given situation, given all the challenges that people of uh, Asian background and of certain faiths had to deal with during that time. So I'm really glad that I was able to help them, and also that led me on to wanting to still do more with all my experiences that I've had primarily in Asia. So I took my training from the UN, where I was uh, trained by psychologists to deal with the different type of stress situations and all of that. And then I got my master's in psychology, and then started doing transformation coaching to people here in the US, from young teenagers to people all the way up to, even in their 50s. And I was surprised uh, with some of the people who was so achieved, that some of the challenges that they had faced and needed help. And I also help people who I had worked with previously at the UN, which I still do on the weekends. And still, I wanted to do something more. And then I was looking around for opportunity to kind of do that. And then I see an organization that is kind of doing that type of work, which happens to be APAC. So that is kind of how I got attracted to APAC, and I'm happy now to be able to share my operations experience and support for the work expected of me.
Thank you so much, Zacky. It's we're really excited to have you with APAC, and we look forward to being able to learn more about you
Thank you.
and having you a part of our family here. Um, I want to thank you for joining us for My Story, APAC's AAPI Story Series. APAC is a place where AAPI owned businesses and AAPI business professionals can connect, do business, and find our community and those who support us. More information about APAC, our partner National ACE, and our storyteller Zachy will be located in the description. These stories are unique to us, but there are so many people out there, regardless of their ethnic heritage, with similar personal stories. Please leave a comment and share your story with us in the comment section. Thank you.